tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Friends, so today I want to kind of continue on where we left off yesterday in talking about the Paticca. Now, as I mentioned, the dependent origination basically is an explanation about the cyclic nature of the mind and body, and especially in terms of the idea about rebirth. But it has two levels. There's what is called external rebirth and internal rebirth. And it's the internal rebirth that actually is the most important thing to understand. Now, a lot of people in the world, when they hear the idea about rebirth and this mind goes from lifetime to lifetime, they, because it's not taught in their religion, or Einstein didn't talk about it maybe, or whatever, they don't believe it. And some people ask it, well, do you have to believe in rebirth to be a Buddhist? And it depends on what your idea of rebirth is. Now, to believe in the traditional lifetime to lifetime version that I explained yesterday about when you die, the mind takes the karmic impressions of the consciousness. There's something called relinking consciousness that leaves the body and finds another place to exist according to its karma. But there's also the internal process. And actually it's the internal progress. External rebirth is only a continuation of the internal process. So that whole process of Paticca, all of those 12 links of the dependent origination happen in every mind moment. It's happening, billions of times in a second, or I don't know how long, whatever, millions of times in a short period of time, throughout the whole life. And it's only when the body cannot support consciousness anymore that the next time consciousness arises, it has to seek out another vehicle in order to be able to manifest its accumulated desires and experience sort of the sum total of its karma, accumulated karma. I mean, it's a hard thing to try to explain, clearly in ordinary language, but anyway, so I wanted to talk about that part today. And especially yesterday, I talked about the most important parts of the Paticca in terms of our practice of the Dhamma. in our practice of meditation are those stages of dependent on feeling arises craving. Dependent on craving arises clinging. Dependent on clinging arises becoming. And dependent on becoming arises birth. And because one is born, then one is automatically subjected to sickness, disease, old age, and death, because that is the nature of anything that is born and conditioned, and that's its nature. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that, and especially the internal process. And then I want to talk about the Eightfold Path too. So, as we've already mentioned, the internal process, repetitive process, really is every time you have an impact on the senses, depending on contact, arises feeling. And we can't do anything about contact because we're here in the world and our senses are open for business, at least 18 hours a day, apart from when we're sleeping, I guess. We can't prevent things from coming in our ear, or to the most part going through our eye or the nose. We can to some extent, but normally, and it's unexpected. At any time, something could come through the ear or the eye or the nose, or the tongue and on the skin, and painful and pleasant feelings. And then we react to them. Most of our life, 90% of your waking life is just reacting to the sense impressions that are coming through your senses. And according to the way you've been programmed to do that. Things you've been told to believe this, don't believe that, like this, don't like that. We copy what we see from our parents, from the media and so on. And all the advertisements, oh, you have to have this, you can't live without this, and you can't be happy without this and that, and so on. So basically there's nothing much called an original thought. There's a lot of talk about that, about original thought and free will, but actually when you look into it in the very deepest level, free will is a kind of just a word that's ultimately not really free. Because even you say you can decide to do something. You can decide to come to this retreat or not. Now, how many, a couple months ago decided I want to go to the retreat? You think you made that decision, right? Okay, on the surface you might have, made the decision, but the causes that brought that about already affected that decision. Like your desire to meditate, and your desire to hopefully, make progress in your meditation practice, and so on. Or things that might have happened to you in your life. But anyway, coming back to this, the dependent on the contact arises feeling. Now even feeling we can't do anything about, because most feeling is conditioned from the past. It comes from the sankharas. In other words, thinking that an itch is something bad and wanting to rub it and scratch it. That's something you've been programmed to do, ever since you were a kid. Or liking certain foods, like I told you with my avocado story, right? So every time we see, hear, smell, taste certain objects, it's already programmed into us that we're going to see that as a painful or something we don't like, or see it as something we like and a pleasant object. So you can't really do much about the feelings once they arise, but we can change our attitude toward them. And that's where the meditation comes into play, its important part. But anyway, with the feeling, and the feeling is basically just a vibration, a cellular vibration, or visible vibration, audio, hearing vibration, odor vibration, flavor vibration. But then we perceive it, as I've already mentioned. The mind draws this picture. And this is a very good example, actually. I forgot to mention this yesterday. You all know what a child's coloring book is. Maybe you used them when you were a young child. It's a book with, it's on the page, it's many dots that are supposed to, when you connect the dots, it then produces an image. How many people have seen those or played with those? Some of you haven't? You gotta get one, they're very interesting. Anyway, it's actually a very clear example of what is happening in our brain. So on a page, let's say up the top it says a Donald Duck. But when you look at just the dots, the image of a Donald Duck doesn't come directly into your mind. But when you start connecting the dots with certain colors, then the image of the Donald Duck or Minnie Mouse or whatever it is begins to stand out. So the same way, with those sensations, and after repeating it many times over again, just with one little, let's say, one. If you heard only that, would you be able to recognize that's Bhante Rahula's voice? I mean, maybe you could if you really, were familiar with it, but normally not. But could you recognize it was Bhante Rahula's voice? But if I went to the store, little by little you would start, that's Bhante Rahula's voice, right? Okay, so that's the way our brain is working in terms of recognizing objects. So that perception process. And then once it's recognized, then the memories of what that meant to you in the past, or or what you want it to be in the future, but mostly in the past, comes in. And you either gonna like that object, or you liked it, or maybe it was just a neutral object. And then you decide to do something about it. You have to make a decision. Am I gonna, like that object or not? Go forward or push it away? I'm not gonna listen to the Zoom program tonight. That guy's crazy. Oh, I want to listen to that. So all that's depending on your past experience. And then once you've completed that, once you've made a karmic action, such as again the example of scratching an itch, you either to get what you wanted or got away from what you didn't want. Then there's the idea that I won, I got it. I got rid of that thing. I got it again. So then you reinforce, you strengthen that idea of that object is good or that object is bad. And you also reinforce the sense of me. I got it. I won. And so you can see how it's that process of becoming which strengthens a habit. So the next time that you hear or see the same object again, most likely you're going to repeat the same reaction. And that's called birth. So birth doesn't necessarily mean birth of the physical body. It means the habit is born again. And the sense of self will be born again because the sense of self is strengthened or weakened depending on your reaction. Now, if you're able to restrain your desire and not give in to your desire, feed it by, always going into your favorite pastry and buying your favorite donuts or, whatever it might be, some other kind of habits. You say, no, I'm not going to do it this time. Or, that's not necessary, based on wisdom. Then you may be weakening the sense of self, or weakening that habit, like whatever it might be, stopping to smoke or eat bad foods or so many things. So I hope you're understanding, what I'm trying to say, because this is really the crux of, how we transform our, actions, our karmic actions that bring problems. So that's why the birth in there is also important. It's the birth of the sense of self, not necessarily the physical body. But when this body is no longer able to please the ego, then it has to get another body. And then it will have another body to identify in another life. So anyway, this process is going on every moment of of our experience, what is called internal birth and death, or the mind moment. A moment of hearing, arise and vanish, maybe many, many moments in succession. That process of birth and death is happening. And normally we don't see that. Anyway, so that is the basically the meaning of that paticca samuppada. The important part of it is that those 5 or 6 stages from contact, feeling, craving, grasping, becoming, and birth. As I mentioned yesterday, even though craving is usually said to be the source of suffering, the second noble truth, the cause of suffering is said to be craving. But it is, but it's the grasping that actually what we can deal with, because you can't immediately overcome craving. It's too deeply embedded in the cellular, even in the cells and molecules and atoms, you could say, of the body. But what you can do is to reduce and weaken the grasping that leads to the becoming. So that's the deepest part of the wisdom of all the Buddha's teaching, in terms of especially the transforming of the mind. It's there in that process. And those are the insights that you get when you practice, especially Vipassana meditation. You could be meditating and just being aware of sitting, breathing, and you're hearing things, feeling things, and there could be a moment when something happens so clear that you go, wow, that's what it means. That's what it means, and that's a kind of an insight. It's a kind of an aha moment that you might have thought about for a while or had some doubts about it, but then in one unexpected second or flash, something could trigger off this insight. And it's usually an insight into one of those ideas about impermanence or no self and the nature of the cause of suffering. So now I want to begin talking about the Eightfold Path, because the Eightfold Path, at least according to the Theravada teaching, is the path, is the way to live, think, and meditate that will gradually allow the life and the mind to unravel its sticky web of karmic interconnections, and especially the negative ones that keep us in a low level of, sort of operation. Just keep us basically going around in circles like a cat chasing its tail. So the Noble Eightfold Path, basically it starts with right understanding. Because the Buddha didn't want us to do anything without clearly understanding why we're going to do it. If you're going to spend half your lifetime or many hours, a lot of time or even money doing something, you ought to know what you're doing. And you ought to know what sort of the benefits are of doing it, right? Because otherwise you probably wouldn't invest that much into it. Look how much people are investing in their education, because of whatever things being told about this or that. So you spend 4 or 5 years of your life, studying, sweating, building up $100,000 debts, at these colleges that you're going to take 30 years to pay off, except when Biden comes and cancels your debt. Okay, that's a good thing, but or Trump won't do it. But anyway, so excuse my.
He just came out.
Okay. So anyway, so the right understanding is important because that gets you started. So the right understanding has 3 levels. Now, normally most of us born in this country, we didn't hear about Dhamma until probably we were, at least in my case, the older of us, the older people that are over, 50 or 60 or 70. We didn't have access to internet. No books are written about Buddhism. There was hardly anything available in this country about Buddhism. So we didn't hear about Dhamma. I should talk for myself, until I was about 22, 23 years old. And that was by chance, just taking a class in world religions. But anyway, so you hear something new and it piques your interest. So you get an intellectual understanding. So reading books, hearing lectures, you start to gain some interest. You think, oh, this has some promise. Sounds, kind of something resonates with you about observing precepts, about, too much over greed and so on, or hatred and so on, how these things cause a lot of problems. So yeah, I'd like to become free from that. So you start to practice. So anyway, the right view is sort of the world view. And it would involve that whole view of like even the lifetime to lifetime rebirth. Although it doesn't have to, but it gives a lot more meaning to the Buddha's teaching that way. But that's up for debate. But so anyway, the right view. So it's your kind of viewpoint, whether you call it a religious viewpoint or philosophical viewpoint. But it's it kind of creates a goal for the mind, liberation from self-created suffering, I'd say. But then the second step is, now I mentioned there's 3 levels of the 3 levels of the right understanding. So the intellectual level. Now I'll get to the other 2 in due time. So the second step is right thought. You have to go on thinking about what you've read or thinking about what you heard. Because most people, when they hear something or read something only once, they'll probably forget it in about an hour. Because they get distracted doing other things. And so they forget about it until maybe sometime later on, oh, what the Buddha said, so it takes repetition, as I mentioned. That's why we repeat things 3 times normally, but 300 times is probably better. So you have to go on repeating. It's to think about it. So you have to think about what you read or heard about, and also to observe it in the daily life. So right thought has 3 kinds. It's the thought of non-harming, the thought of renunciation, or I like to say the thought of lightening up or downsizing. People's lives are too burdened with so many things they're doing all the time, too many possessions, and they can't go places because who's going to feed their 7 cats and dogs, who's going to water their 50 house plants, who's going to protect all their things, and so on. So to downsize, so you have more free time, your mind isn't so burdened with a lot of things. So that's an aspect of non-greed, and not wanting to just go on accumulating more things because it's a burden. And then the thought of non-ill will, the thought of non-having ill will towards people and resenting people and holding grudges and thinking bad thoughts about people. It's kind of like a poison to ourselves. And then also the thought of non-cruelty, about not being cruel to others, even with our speech or with our actions and so on. And that's why I like, trying to save insects instead of squashing them or flushing them down the sink. Have compassion and try to put it outside if you can. So, but basically it means thinking about the Dhamma, thinking about karma in your life. Just go back in your life and think about all the things you did out of greed, possessive greed, ego-centered greed, and hatred, and see what kind of suffering that it caused you. You got to think about it, because if you don't think about it, it's just it's there in the back of the mind, but it doesn't really get to you. So you got to go back and even think about these things. Is a way of thinking about the Dhamma, and to see the reality of it, about the cause of suffering. Whether it's in your life, you can watch other people's lives, your parents, or other family members, and certainly what you read in the news. Greed, hatred, and delusion is proclaiming itself from every lamppost, in the world. If we know how to open our eyes and see it. But most people don't have blinders on. So that right thought is, and the purpose of it is increasing our motivation to overcome our laziness to practice it. So anyway, it's important that right thought is thinking about the Dhamma. And then that leads you to start practicing. So you have your right understanding, which is like a worldview. And then you've thought about it and got motivated. Now what are you actually going to do?
Practice applied.
Speak and act.
Yeah, you have to start, changing your karmic actions. Because in the right view, everything is focused on karma, really. Our negative actions and transforming negative actions into wholesome thoughts and actions. So anyway, you start cleaning up your tongue, your mouth. That means right speech. So the third step of the Eightfold Path is right speech. And the ones that you recite each evening, right? Anybody rattle them off real quick?
False, malicious, and
Harsh.
False speech, malicious speech, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. So we all know speech can create a lot of suffering, sometimes worse than a stab wound or even a bullet. The wrong words at the wrong time to some person could ruin relationships, ruin friendships. It could cause you public humility, all kind of things. Right? We see it all the time happening. So that's why the right speech is considered a very powerful form of, Dhamma. And so to avoid those negative, what are considered negative types of speech, and cultivate their opposites. And then right action. That is things you do with the body. So physically harming things with the body, stealing, which we do with the body, and sexual misconduct. That means hurting others through aggressive and abusive types of expression of that, strong, desire. Taking advantage of people. We don't have to explain that. We know what that is. So, because that's really heavy karma. People get killed over that. A lot of people don't kill over just bad speech, but could be. But doing those other things, they do. So the killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, those are sort of be the three karmic kind of actions we do with the body. And then there's also, those are the main ones, those precepts. So the practice of sila, because most of the suffering in the world comes from people not following the precepts. Now just think about it. Think of all the suffering and problems in the world and see if they aren't caused by people killing things and physically harming people. And stealing and sexual misconduct, and also the other types of slander, slandering speech, harsh speech, false speech. And just to think, my gosh, if everybody in the world could just follow the 5 precepts, just 5 teeny weeny precepts, what's the big deal? Why can't people follow them? Just think about it. Why can't people follow the precepts?
Because of the ego problem.
Yeah, because of the wrong worldview. Wrong views about life. Not understanding what life is about. Not understanding the law of karma. So that's why actually wrong views are considered one of the most evil, pernicious aspects of the mind, because it leads to everything else. Anyway, so having that right view, and then sort of clean up the karma, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Oh, even the right livelihood also is part of the what is called sila. So the right speech, right action, and then right livelihood. That means we all have to earn a living in life, or most people do. So we should have a job or occupation that doesn't cause us to directly or indirectly break one of the precepts. So typical common things that probably somebody, a Buddhist probably shouldn't be doing would be like selling narcotics and liquor and poisons and these kind of things that, ruin people's minds or cause suffering to others, as well as slaughtering animals or even raising animals with the intention to sell them to be slaughtered is considered a wrong livelihood. And, cheating in business, telling lies, crooked business, not telling the truth about one's products, lying about it. We see that's rampant all over the place, right? Even in the medicine provision, there's a lot of lies and deceit about what medicines do too, isn't it? Just in order to sell drugs and stuff like that. or to get you to take all these tests that cost thousands of dollars for ultimately maybe no benefit. So there's so much going on here. So therefore, in this day and age, it's kind of difficult. You have to be very careful, especially younger people who are starting out to get a job, to be careful of what you sort of sign up for. That will make you regret later on. Because I've talked to a lot of people over the years who found themselves in a profession that they didn't know what they were getting into, and then they regretted it and wanted to get out. So because like even a secretary, right? A little secretary in office, just keeping the books for some corporation. Seems harmless, right? But then the boss comes over and looks over the shoulder and says, why don't you change that 50 million income to just 10 million? What? That wouldn't be honest. So the boss says, well, there's 10 people waiting for your job. And so you might feel compelled to, tell a little lie or comply with that, just to please the boss. But, there's all kinds of other situations like that. So because you're the one that has to go home and sleep at night. And then you might be, worrying about feeling guilty or some other disturbing thoughts about having to do things, compromise your sort of beliefs and so on. So that's why it takes a lot of, mindfulness to try to do that. So far we've talked about those 5 sort of stages of the Eightfold Path. And those first 3, right understanding, or right understanding and right thought, fall under an umbrella group called wisdom. And right speech, right action, right livelihood falls under the umbrella group of sila. Now, sila is an interesting word. And usually it means following the precepts. But the actual word, it comes from the root word of sil, like in Sinhala language, right? Sitala, it means cold, right? So sitala. So it means cooling behavior. Behavior that cools you down. So when we tell lies, kill, cheat, lie, do all the, it's said our head's on fire with greed, hatred, and delusion. Or it heats you up. So to cool down means by practicing sila, it cools the mind down because you become free from guilt, worry, remorse, and fear of somebody finding out you told a lie, or you stole something, or you went with their partner, and so on. There's always disturbing sleep and so on. So that means our mind's on fire. So cooling behavior. So all those 3 aspects of right speech, right action, right livelihood are part of this group called sila, which is considered a kind of a prerequisite for being able to gain, good progress in the meditation. Because most of our hindrances come from not following kind of the precepts. So the last 3 steps of the Eightfold Path, can anybody say them real quick? Tip of your tongue.
Effort, mindfulness, concentration.
Right. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And the right effort means the effort to do all of the above. The effort to develop right view, the effort to practice right thought, or to develop right thought, the effort to practice right speech, right action, right livelihood, and the effort to practice mindfulness and concentration too. But more specifically, there's 4 aspects to the right effort. The effort to abandon negative or unwholesome states of mind if they come into your mind. Like maybe the thought of telling a lie, or the thought of using some bad speech about somebody, or slandering somebody. Usually we get a lot of cheap thrills by doing that. We want to be known for doing things, or just to get revenge or whatever. So, but the effort, so it takes effort to abandon it. But it's not easy to abandon it unless you have something to replace it with. So that's why sort of built into that is the effort to cultivate the opposite quality or the wholesome aspect of that to replace it with. So the effort to abandon an unwholesome thought that comes in your mind, and then the effort to keep them from coming again in the future. And then the effort to cultivate wholesome states that you may not yet have, and the effort to perfect them. So like the efforts to practice Dhamma, the effort to get up every day to meditate, or to read a sutta every day, or to do a kind deed every day, to practice dana, generosity, to practice the sila requires a great effort because of the strong conditioning. So all 3 of those last 3 steps belong to the umbrella group of what is called concentration. So, it's kind of the term concentration is, understood in different ways, but anyway, it's called Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. The Pali words for the Eightfold Path, 8 steps, are broken into 3 groups called Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. And this is where there's a direct connection to the Paticca Samuppada. That Sila, Samadhi, and Panya are connected to becoming, grasping, and craving in the Paticca Samuppada. There's a direct connection between them. So, Sila is considered the negative becoming, because committing those negative actions, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, slandering, those kind of actions, they lead to painful consequences. And what do you call painful becoming, because they increase the likelihood of your having to reap the painful results of that, somewhere in the future. Look, criminals or other people they may get away with their crime for 10 or 20 years, but we hear it all the time, somebody getting found out 40 years later, 50 years later, that they did something, right? These cold cases, coming up. People were hiding in some tropical island and they got discovered, put in prison or killed by somebody. So our karma follows us down even years and years, even future lifetimes even. So anyway, so the Sila is directly connected to the becoming in the Paticca Samuppada. That means the generation of karma. So we can change the becoming by practicing Sila. If you abstain from those negative actions and cultivate their opposite qualities, then the becoming to more painful effects will get less and less, and creating conditions for more happiness and understanding and so on to develop. So that's how the sila is directly connected to the becoming. It's about changing your external behavior for the most part. Because you could have a desire to see, let's say, smash a mosquito. You know, you're sitting there. An ordinary person, if they, didn't have, much training, if they get bit by a mosquito, they might automatically, just try to snatch it. Or you see a centipede in your sink, flush it down the drain or whatever. So the sila, the precept against harming or telling lies, or you might have the desire to do it. Let's just stick with the example of hitting a mosquito. So mosquitoes biting you, and you're going back and forth from into, craving and grasping. The moment the little pain arises from a mosquito bite, then there's that desire to get rid of it. And you're thinking, should I do it? Should I not? That could go on for a minute or two. That's grasping. And then you make a decision. I'm going to do it. And so the volition comes up, if the arm comes up, but at the last minute, something inside says, wait, stop. Pull the hand back down. So at least you didn't kill the mosquito. But you still wanted to, right? Okay. But at least, mosquito is one kind of example. Let's say it was a human being. That if you went and killed him, you might get put in prison. Life in prison, even executed perhaps, or depending on where you are. But if you refrain, at the last minute you gain your senses and you refrain from killing, at least you're not going to get put in prison for killing. Now you could be tried for conspiracy or something like that, but let's just keep it simple. So therefore, the sila basically just stops your physical behavior, but it doesn't necessarily change your mind. Now, it can help to change the mind, but not necessarily. And so that's where grasping is connected with the practice of the concentration. So we're talking about sila, samadhi, and panya being connected to craving, grasping, and becoming. Is that clear? Okay, what's sila connected with? Quick. Becoming. What is samadhi connected with? Quick.
We don't know yet.
Grasping. So grasping is the thinking, right? So we said grasping is predominantly it's thinking and amplified thinking about the object of your craving. And that could be a longer process than craving is an initial thought that comes up. And it doesn't go anywhere unless you focus on it and start building it up. Well, yes, I have to have that, or I have to get rid of that. But the initial thought of craving only lasts a very short period of time, and if you don't pay attention to it, you'll get distracted and do something else. And only 3 hours later, you say, oh, I thought I was going to get a cup of coffee. You forgot all about it, right? So attention is what brings everything into the viewpoint. The attention that we give to things is what our mental world is created from that. So in concentration is connected with reducing grasping. So concentration means when you concentrate, you slow your thoughts down, right? So how many notice that in your meditation? When eventually after the 30 minutes of trying to follow your breath, you found that the thoughts were getting slower and slower, less and less. and so on, right? So that's the effect, that the concentration will affect the grasping, that means the thoughts about it. So that in a deep state of concentration, the last thing that would come into your mind at that time would go out to kill somebody, probably, right? Or to go out and tell a lie, or go out and steal something, or go out and abuse somebody. Or even go out and get a drink, because you're already high, off the concentration. And that means being in the present moment. Concentration is synonymous with the present moment. Because when you're concentrated, that means the mind is in the present moment at that time. It's not the object, it has to do with the object. It's the mind has come to a point of being still in the present moment without thoughts or distractions. So anyway, that's why the practice of concentration helps to stop that grasping process, and in turn the becoming. Now there's one thing left. What's that?
Craving.
Craving. Okay. So craving, grasping, and becoming. Now, craving can only be eliminated with the second stage of enlightenment, by attaining the path of once returning. I mean, if you want to follow that traditional explanation of the 10 fetters, it's only with the, not even the state of the Sotapanna. Even the state of the Sotapanna can still have those, greed and hatred, but it wouldn't result in doing some kind of heavy karma, like breaking any of the major precepts. But it can still have thoughts about it. So, only with the practice of the panya, that's where panya comes in. So sila, samadhi, panya. Sila affects becoming. Samadhi affects,
Grasping.
and panya affects.
Craving.
Okay, yeah, that's very good. Okay, so that only occurs with that first stage of enlightenment, or entering the stream, because I already mentioned it. It only occurs with the once return. So when we're once returning, that craving is weakened, let's say 90%. So there's still a little bit left, but a great deal of it has been eradicated. So therefore, your buttons would have to get pushed quite a lot for some reaction of desire or aversion to come in the mind. Or as I mentioned before, it may come out in dreams. And then the third stage, it's totally eliminated. So that's why the panya is connected with the craving. And that's why you can't get rid of craving, that easily. So you shouldn't worry about it too much. But work on grasping, that's the important part. Most of our life revolves around grasping and becoming. But the craving naturally has to be there, but it's the grasping that we keep on thinking about things. And there's a little saying, there's a little jingle. You like jingles? You know what jingle is? It's not jingle bells. So it explains karma. It goes like this: sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. That's a very accurate description of how that process of karma works. It starts with a thought. Now, one thought is probably not going to do anything. But if you start thinking about it again and again, like the thought to maybe steal something or tell a lie, or you might have a thought, but you kind of forget about it, and again come up, and so you keep on thinking about it. At some point, you're going to do it, probably. Now, it could be a good thought too. There's also good, good becomings if they're wholesome ones. But for most people, it's unwholesome. So sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. So one time, if you go out and steal something, but then you felt guilty about it and you stopped and you didn't steal anymore, you might never get caught for having done that or told a lie. But because of some benefit in what you did, you do it again. And then as you keep repeating that action, it becomes a habit. Because the neural pathways in the brain keep on getting strengthened every time you repeat something. It strengthens those neural pathways in the brain and nervous system that can't be reached by, surgical knives and so on. Can it? Nowadays? Okay. So, and then if you sow a habit, then people are going to start labeling you as this or that kind of person, right? That person's a liar. That person's a thief. They normally won't say that if you just did it one time, although they might, So then people start labeling you because you're repeating these things. And then that's your character. You become known as this or that type of person. That's a wise person. That's a foolish person. That's whatever. So, and then sow a character, reap a destiny. Now, if that destiny is in prison or getting murdered by somebody in this life that you did something to, it can go to the next life, and you reap that destiny even in a future life. So anyway, that's just something to remember. And the point is, it's the power of thought. That the thought is really what creates the world. Because one thought in, let's say, Adolf Hitler's mind turned into World War II. It killed millions and millions of people. And look at the thought in some politician's mind, what it's doing, causing all kind of waves around the world. So thoughts are very powerful. And that's why right thought is important. Because wrong thought is what leads to more suffering. Right thought is the way we can gradually change that. But you have to keep repeating right thought over and over and over again for it to then have tangible good results. So anyway, that's what I wanted to I wanted to connect those three aspects of craving, grasping, and becoming to the Eightfold Path of the Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. Because a lot of people don't make those connections, and they see these teachings of the Buddha as being kind of disjointed and here, and they haven't really seen how to kind of put that all together in how everything is really linked up and so on. And how also methodically it is that, each of those things, all those things are told in an order because that is the way that they're gradually, developed. So I think I may stop with that at this point and give you something to think about.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So again, if that's stimulate any questions for you. You can write them down later for this evening's discussion. And then again, these are things that you can think about even in your meditation. You know, not all thinking is bad. It's wrong thinking it leads to problems. Right thinking leads to more right things. You know, and so to get something clear in the mind, that having those insights, you need to sometimes go around and think. A lot of times we think, oh, we already know that. We already know that. Yeah, but that's because you were thinking about it when you were reading the morning newspaper or smoking a joint or something. You know, it doesn't really penetrate deeply. But when you're meditating and, you know, you're sort of in a more calm state, then you can think more clearly. So, you know, even in the next meditation, if you have, you know, once you've, you know, quieted the mind a bit, but if you're still having difficulty, you know, change your thoughts from erratic, uncontrolled thinking to directed thinking, thinking about the Dhamma. So just think about the things that we were just talking about. Go back in your life and connect Sila, Samadhi, and Panya with craving, grasping, and becoming, and see what the results were. Things like that. So that's called investigation of Dhamma, actually. You know, in the Satipatthana Sutta, there's a category at the end of the sutta called the 7 factors of enlightenment. And the first one is mindfulness, and the second one is investigation of Dhamma. And investigation of Dhamma means kind of mentally investigating what you have been studying, the Dhamma. Investigating. You know, not just craving causes suffering, just not just craving causes. Investigate it. What is craving? All the different kinds of craving. What is suffering? All the different kinds of suffering. Mental suffering, psychological suffering, physical suffering. So there's lots of aspects to it that most people don't bother investigating because they think, we don't need that stuff. And maybe some people may not, but it really helps to build a clear picture of the Dhamma, and it helps to, you know, keep the mind more focused. Okay? Okay, go ahead and mindfully, again, as we've done before, just take a deep, slow breath. See how quick you can bring your attention to the body, letting go of that outward focus. Just take a deep 3-part breath. Hold the air in the lungs for as long as you comfortably can. Let out the breath, feel that relaxation